Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today to discuss this topic. I'm going to be talking about how artificial intelligence can undress you, and specifically I'm going to be talking about deepfakes and deep nudes. And so just a bit about myself before we get started and to give people a little bit of a chance to get on. I am a research associate at the Learning Network, which is based out of the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children. And I'm also a PhD candidate in political science at Western University. And my interest in deepfakes actually started in thinking about the election and how these videos might impact politics. And I have a piece about that was published in The Conversation. But in investigating how it would impact politics, I came to realize how connected these videos are to image-based sexual violence, which is what I'll be speaking about today. And I just want to start with a land acknowledgement. So I'm here in London, Ontario, and I'm on the lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Adirondack, and the Lenape-Wendat peoples. And I know people are tuning in from all over and from different locations. So I would encourage you to find out whose land you're on. And I actually have a link for that. If you go into the chat box, there's a list of resources, and you can see nativeland.ca, and there you can find out whose land you're on. And just a bit of a content warning in terms of what I'm speaking about, what to expect out of this talk. And so, as I've already mentioned, I'm speaking about image-based sexual violence, and that includes how it's connected to the continuum of gender-based violence. And so I'll be speaking a bit about intimate partner violence, structural violence, sibling abuse, these types of topics. If you're finding, this isn't the right time for me to be doing this right now, if you think you need a bit of a break, that is perfectly okay. This is being recorded, and then it's going to be on our Facebook page, or the NFF Facebook page. And so you can watch it at a later time as well. And you could always email me or get in touch with me if you have any specific questions. And so an outline of what we're talking about today, I have three major questions that I want us to consider. The first is, what are deepfakes and deep nudes, which is a very common question. I'll speak a little bit about the technology behind it, how these have come up, how they're connected to other technology. My second question is, how can they be used to facilitate image-based sexual violence? And so in order to answer this question, I'm going to look into the history of deepfakes and deep nudes, and also how they're currently being used. And my third question is, how can we prevent and respond to deepfakes and deep nudes that share non-consensual sexual imagery or videos? And so here I'll be providing some resources that are also linked in the chat box. And just a word at the beginning as to why I'm using the term image-based sexual violence. A very common term we hear in association with deepfakes and deep nudes is revenge porn. There's three main reasons why I don't think this is the correct term at all. The first is that revenge is really loaded. When we think about revenge, we usually think there was some action to provoke it, and therefore the revenge might be justified. Whereas in this case, we are talking about abuse, it is not justified. And also, revenge is sometimes considered in the context of personal relationships. So presumably you know the individual who's doing this. And when we're talking about deepfakes and deep nudes, it could be absolutely anyone who's producing these videos. And so you might not have any relationship to them at all. And actually we see that very often. The second reason is that there's a whole ton of motivations for people to produce these videos. It could be for financial gain, it could be for control and attention seeking. We'll be speaking a little bit more about that later, but sufficient to say revenge isn't the only motivation. And the final reason why I'm not using the term revenge porn is because typically when we consider porn and common understandings of porn, it's an actor engaging in this activity for entertainment, presumably being paid. There's some consent notions there, whereas what we're talking about is a non-consensual sharing of imagery. And so what are deepfakes and deep nudes? The first thing I want to say is that this technology is not new. So we've had video editing technology, we've had imaging editing technology for some time now. So we can think of Photoshop. You might have something on your computer or your phone that you can edit videos. So this has been around for some time, the ability to edit things. And even we see apps that are getting pretty sophisticated at this. So on Instagram, I can face swap with my cat. I can change my face to put on makeup to make it seem like I'm in the middle of the desert or a galaxy. We've had these manipulation technologies. But what's different with deepfakes and deep nudes is that they use artificial intelligence to create these videos, and that makes them much more sophisticated. And so previously, the type of technology to make these videos was limited to big budget movies. You might think of Star Wars, for instance. They had access to this technology to make these really convincing fakes. But it wasn't as public before. And this changed in November 2017 when the technology to make deepfakes was shared on Reddit. And so it's much more easy to access this technology, to use it. If you have a computer and you can download it, then essentially you can make these types of videos. Not to say you could always make them well, but you have the ability to do so and to build your skill. In terms of how these videos are defined, I'll start with deepfakes. And deepfakes are videos where either there is facial swapping, so I might have someone else here and their face would be imposed on top of mine so that it appears as though they're speaking and they're here. In comparison, another way you can make a deepfake is to manipulate aspects of my face. So you can make it seem like I'm smiling or saying a certain word when I'm not doing so. And one of the most popular deepfake videos that you might have already seen is one with President Obama, and it was made to make it seem as though he's saying certain things about Trump and technology. And that was made with the actor Jordan Peele. And they mapped his face in order to impose it upon President Obama's, and they also used Jordan Peele as a voice actor. And so sometimes with deepfakes, they might also include audio manipulation to make it seem like you're saying things that you never said. And specifically what we're looking at today is sexual deepfakes. And so not all deepfakes are sexual. We see a lot of actors, especially Nicolas Cage, being imposed into a variety of videos. But sexual deepfakes are a particular type where an individual is imposed into pornography or some type of sexual video. And this is done without their consent, often without them even knowing about it. And it has the impact of literally stealing their face and placing them into this video they were never in, and also erasing the original actor who was in the video. And deep nude is slightly different. So deep nude is inherently sexual, unlike deep fakes. They're only made for sexual purposes. And what happens in that instance is it matches your face to a nude body. So they would take my face, try to find a similar skin tone, similar lighting, in order to make it appear as though I was in a nude image. And just a little bit about how they work, because I think lots of folks are curious about this and want to understand it a bit more. So it is a form of artificial intelligence, which is where the computer is learning on its own in order to make these videos. And I don't say that to be scary, to make it seem like we're in Black Mirror or something, but it is some forms of artificial technology or artificial intelligence are available now and are being used. And I think that's important to understand because it goes to show how sophisticated these videos can be. And specifically, deepfakes use a form of machine learning called deep learning. This is where the computer teaches itself to identify different things and different patterns. So to identify, say, my face, or to identify how I'd match into a certain video. And while this has been around since about the 1950s, there's been significant advances of late. And just to illustrate how that would work. So say someone wanted to make a deepfake of me. Before we had artificial intelligence, they would have to put in all my characteristics. So she has dark brown hair and brown eyes, and this is what her lips look like. And this is difficult. Even imagine if you're trying to describe your friend. It's really time consuming in order to identify all their characteristics so the computer can understand it. What's different about deepfakes is that instead of trying to describe all this and telling the computer what to look for, you can just give the computer images and it will identify aspects. So you could give the computer, say 10, 100 images of me, and it will say, this is where cheekbones are, this is exactly where her nose are. The computer can do this in a much faster way than we can. And it also has the capability to identify things that would be more difficult for a human to do so. And so when we have this type of technology, we're seeing a big advancement in image manipulation and also in video manipulation. And I want to speak a little bit more about this because we have seen since 2014 a big advancement. This was the introduction of generative adversarial networks. And so what happened with these networks is that you had two models. There was a generative model and a discriminative model. And essentially the discriminative model tries to determine something by what it's not. So it show images of me and then show images of different individuals, of different animals. And so the computer could get really good at saying Dianne, not Dianne, and classifying that. And what was introduced with these generative adversarial networks, or GANs, was that it started to introduce other models that it can compare itself to. And so continually the computer would be tested and trying to beat itself in order to say, well, what's Dianne and not Dianne, and get better and better at identifying pictures of me. And so when it had this capability, this is really where we saw a jump in convincing deepfakes and deep nudes. It got really good. The computer was continually looking for aspects of myself, testing to see what wasn't myself. And this was a really large advancement. And this technology isn't something that, again, is limited to big budget studios. It's something that's being shared on the internet. There's already a variety of apps that are available, some that are rather public and some that you'd have to look around a bit for in order to find. But it's definitely possible for anybody at this point to make a deep fake or deep nude. Essentially what they would need is just images of you, preferably high quality, in order to make these types of videos or types of deep nudes. And this means that they could grab it off your social media. It also means for some individuals that they could have their pictures taken without their consent. And so it might be their partner, for instance, who takes pictures of them and shares it in order to make these types of videos. It could be a sibling, it could be someone on the street. And so these pictures might be available publicly or they might not be. And it's important to say that even if your pictures are on Facebook or available publicly, for some individuals they have to be. It's part of your job, it's part of your advocacy. This is not consent to be making these types of videos. When we take an individual's image and impose it onto something else, this is non-consensual. So that's really important when we're talking about this, to make sure that we're not blaming individuals for the production of these videos and for deep nudes. And so my second question I want to address is, how can they be used to facilitate image-based sexual violence? And I think here it's really important to consider the history of deepfakes and deep nudes. And so actually where deepfakes came out of was a user on Reddit in November 2017 who was making sexual videos where they imposed popular actresses like Scarlett Johansson into sexual videos. And so the very founding of deepfakes was based on image-based sexual violence or sexual abuse. It was taking women's images and imposing them into these videos, and that's how it was first shared and popularized. And same with deep nudes, it was produced as an app, and it was an app that would only take women's images, and so it wouldn't work for man or male-coded individuals, and it would be able to make it seem as though that individual is nude. And so the very founding of these types of technologies that we're talking about were based on non-consensual sharing of sexual videos and imageries. And we've seen that continue on since then. And so there was a report that came out recently by Deep Trace Labs. And this is one of the first reports we have that shares statistics on deep nudes and deep fakes. And it was entitled The State of Deepfakes 2019. I'm just going to share some of their stats because they're some of the first information that we've had about this. And again, this resource is in the list of resources in the chat box. And so first of all, they found this was a growing phenomenon. Between December 2018 and July 2019, there was a doubling of deepfake videos. It went from 7,000 to 14,000. And so this technology is being shared more widely, more of these videos are being produced. It's more pressing that we address and talk about this. And they found of those videos, they looked at a variety of sites like YouTube, different videos, websites. They looked in this case also at pornography websites. And they found that 96% of deepfake videos online are non-consensual sexual videos. And so this goes to show it's continuing the trend of producing these sexual videos without consent from the very founding to the current moment. And also that 100% of the non-consensual sexual videos target women. And so all these videos featured women. 99% of those were actresses in different areas. I think it was 25% were South Korean, a certain percent were European, but 99% were celebrities or actresses. And just to give you the sense of the reach of these videos, it's not like they're being shared on a small scale. There is entire websites dedicated to sharing deepfake sexual videos. And of the top 4, they received 134 million views. So they have a large reach. There's a desire for these videos, there's people viewing them. If there's a video produced, it's very likely there'll be a lot of individuals watching it. And while this report was an advancement and is really important to our understanding, it's still an underestimate. And that's for a couple of reasons. The first is that these were looking at public websites. So websites like YouTube, websites like the pornography websites or the sexual video websites. And it wasn't considering how these videos are used on a one-on-one level. So say an individual who sends a video to someone's boss in order to control them or get them fired, sends it to their friends and families. That is not being captured right now. And that's one of the ways we see these videos being used. We also see them being shared on apps like WhatsApp, where it's on individual messaging, and we can't track or monitor these. And so the scale of the problem is much larger than is being captured in that report, and it's something that we absolutely need more research on. And I want to ask a question now, and I'll give you the opportunity to type in the chat box if you want to answer it. You could also sit internally and consider it to yourself, or if you're watching the video after the fact, you can pause the video. And that question is, why do you think so many of these videos, so many of the deep fakes and deep nudes target women? And I'll just speak a bit to that. These videos aren't produced in isolation. Sometimes when we're talking about technology, it seems like technology is neutral, or in fact, technology is always a good thing. But technology is very tied into our current biases and what's going on in our society. So it plays into societal discrimination and oppression, where women are continually sexualized, in particular women of color. This idea that women are an object, they're only there for entertainment, it's no problem to take a woman's body. This is what we see these deep fakes and deep nudes playing into. So what's going on in society, and they're reflecting that right back at us. And so while technological advancement in general can feel like a good thing and like we're moving forward in society, we really need to consider how this technology is being used and what biases they're playing into. And insofar as how these videos are connected to image-based abuse, we know that they can be a tool. They can be a tool to perpetrate intimate partner violence. So a partner could produce these videos or ask someone else or pay someone else to produce these videos in order to control their partner or to harm their partner. It could be used in instances of bullying between youth, child maltreatment, sibling abuse, all these different forms of violence. It offers them one more tool in order to control and harm individuals. And we see in the findings that when we're talking about image-based sexual violence, the impacts of it, the mental health impacts of it, are very similar to sexual assault and experiences of sexual assault. And so I have a quote from a survivor who's 14 and had nude images shared. And they said, "You do feel shame. You do feel post-traumatic stress in many cases. At least I did. Those night terrors, that anxiety, walking through the halls of your high school feeling as though everyone's seen you naked, it is truly a lasting form of sexual exploitation." And so while there hasn't been a whole ton of studies looking specifically at deep fakes and deep nudes, we can look at studies talking about image-based sexual violence and experiences of that. And also there's a TED Talk I'd really encourage you to watch. It's by Noelle Martin. And she is a woman who had images taken off her Facebook, and she experienced deep nudes. And so they imposed her face onto nude images. And so again, that's shared in the chat box. I'd really encourage you to watch that. And so some of the things that we see in the research and based on Noelle's talk that people experience when they are subject to a deep fake or a deep nude is a feeling of social rupture. They almost talk about before the video, before this happened to them, and then after, as though it's completely different. Their lives changed that drastically. They can have impacts to their employment, including that they were let go or it hinders them getting future jobs. They can be targeted for online harassment. And this could be after the video is released, individuals trying to add them on Facebook, sending them messages, asking for more sexual videos. It can also be victim blaming after they speak out. And so in her TED Talk, Noelle talks about the fact that she said that these were fake videos and tried to raise awareness. Individuals came back with all these horrible insults and really subjecting her to online abuse. They can experience doxing, where their private information is shared online. So say along with the video, they say this is where you could find this individual. This is their email. This is their home address. And in accordance with that, they could also experience stalking. There's a feeling that a lot of individuals mentioned in terms of being isolated from others, feeling as though they didn't want to be out in public there was a lack of trust there, that they had to shut down all their social media, and this really had an impact on their lives. If you think about how often we use social media and how often we're on it, we can certainly see how that's the case. I use it to message my partner, to message my friends. I use it to get updates about them. So if you're not on it or able to access it, it can certainly have an impact, especially when that's not your choice. And also the mental health difficulties that were identified already. The final thing I want to talk about is the silencing. And so we see this especially with activists or people advocating, whether that be advocating about image-based sexual violence or advocating in terms of climate change, whatever it might be. These videos could be produced to silence these individuals, to blackmail them into not talking, to shame them into not talking. And I also want to identify this impacts the actor as well. So the actor who has their face erased or covered up. One individual said it feels as though their identity was stolen when this occurred. There's also a financial impact. This was their video, they spent money to produce it, and now it's being taken for something else. But I think this is something that we really need to explore more so, because certainly the literature on that is lacking right now. And so the final thing I want to address, and I want to make sure we consider this so that it doesn't feel too dire, it doesn't feel like a dystopia, that's not the direction I want to take us in, is how can we prevent and respond to image-based sexual abuse? And in terms of responding, there is some options right now. And so there are legal options, including criminal options, in order to address image-based sexual abuse. And that includes things like harassment. It includes Bill C-13, which is in terms of the sharing of intimate images. That's more so the case if you shared an intimate image and it was meant to be private and goes public. Deepfakes are a bit different because it's not your image that is not your intimate image that is being made public. It's your face being imposed onto an intimate image. And so we still need to have more literature and research on how we go about that. If it's used for blackmail, then we have options like fraud. And so if you're someone who has experienced this, I'd really, if you want to, encourage you to talk about that and explore what your options are. There's similarly civil options as well in order to address this and potentially be awarded damages. We did see one instance in Ontario where an individual had their private intimate image shared and they were able to receive damages for that. In terms of media, how to address these videos, so some media platforms do give you the ability to request that these videos get taken down. And in the list of resources that I shared, there's an online removal guide by the Cyber Civil Rights website. And it gives you some guidance about how to go about requesting that these videos get taken down. But as we know, once a video is out there, it's really hard to get all instances of it. Maybe Facebook and Twitter will take it down, but it might pop out in a whole bunch of different places. So that's really difficult to track. And that's one thing that Noelle spoke about in her TED Talk, trying to go to all these different websites and get rid of the videos, and they just kept coming. Another option is seeking personal and relational support. So I think this is a really important piece, reaching out to sexual violence services that are appropriate to you, if that's something you want to do, engaging in your own supports and cares, what gives you strength. And if you're an individual who wants to support someone who's experienced this, then there is a guide to speaking to survivors that I shared in a list of resources, and this is by Take Back the Tech. In terms of preventing deepfakes and deep news being shared in this way, we need to do more at a governmental level. We need to be establishing offices. We need to have discussions about this in order to ensure it doesn't happen, and that when it does, people have support. And so, for instance, in the UK, they have a hotline now. They call it the revenge porn hotline, but as I said, I prefer image-based sexual abuse hotline. So establishing something like that can give people a lot of options, can make sure this is being monitored, can make sure we have advocacy around this. There definitely needs to be training of police forces, training in schools, in order to make sure this is being discussed. There's an understanding of it. There's understanding that it's happening, and it's likely it's going to happen more at the rates that deepfakes and deep nudes are increasing. And so this could be education and awareness campaigns, maybe around debunking some of the myths, around understanding what this is, understanding what to do if you've been subject to it. And on an individual level, one thing that we can do is take control of our digital spaces. And so that can mean a lot of different things. It could mean making your pictures private, having a secure password and a lock on your phone. Again, this is just taking control in your space. It doesn't necessarily protect individuals against deepfakes and deep nudes. And so that's important to understand, and so that we don't get blameworthy or accusatory. But in order to give us maybe some sense of security, I do want to offer the Hack Bloom's Do-It-Yourself Guide to Feminist Cybersecurity. And that, again, is in the list of resources that's in the comment box. And so the final question I want to pose today that you can consider after the video, you can pause and have a discussion if you're with other individuals, is what can you do to prevent and respond to image-based sexual violence? And there's something that all of us can do. It could be educating yourself, increasing your own knowledge. It could be raising awareness and just having a discussion that this is happening. It's something we have to be aware of. You could push for training at your work, at your school place, to say we have to be able to respond to disclosures when this happens. We have to understand it. What I really want to say is this video itself is not enough. We have to take this information and move it forward. And I'll take a pause now to ask if there's any questions. You put them in the chat box. Okay, so again, there's that list of resources that's in the chat box. I encourage you to go through those. They provide a lot more information, can further your understanding, and also point in different directions. Especially if there's something specific that you're looking for. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is also included in that list, so you can email me and we could have a further chat, or I could offer you any future directions if you find that would be helpful. And I just want to thank you so much for all joining.